So screenstorming is this term I came up with at the beginning of 2012 while I was yeah, it was the beginning of 2012 when I was trying to communicate this sort of vision and process that I had in mind. So
And has to do with PLNs or personalized learning networks too.
Right. So, I mean, basically, going back a long time, a missing piece kind of in my life and in my process of learning, my like ideal or preferred process of learning has been sort of conversations and connections with a wider range of people than school itself has provided, or family, or just circumstances I've been in. And even meeting some people, that's not the same thing as having like a broad network, and it's not the same as having sort of this thing that just hasn't happened or hasn't been in play. So screenstorming is based on this idea of like actively communicating, bouncing around ideas, connecting with people, learning, and basically brainstorming using computers and devices, but also stepping back from the screen even, and kind of situationally brainstorming and so on. So really, screenstorming refers to a bunch of related things. One of them Rose described on a recent hangout, which is charrettes, which is a process of basically collaborative brainstorming using a time constraint like 12 or 24 or 48 hours, where a bunch of people will get together like in a room or a shared space and try to explore an issue and figure out answers, and then conclude the time period with an output, whether that's like a plan for something or a solution to a problem, like a design problem, or some kind of output. So that's one thing. But then there's also the idea of a sort of coaching or consulting that's basically this psych tank concept, which is based on either using Google Hangouts, or it could happen in person, but for this type of thing, Hangouts might be the more practical way to do it in a lot of cases. But the idea is bring in several different professionals or roles. So instead of like often with coaching and consulting, you might meet with a coach or work with a therapist or a psychiatrist, or meet with a friend and have a conversation or something like that, or have a one-on-one with your parents or whatever, clergy or some kind of thing. There's a whole idea of like basically getting multiple types of people coming from different perspectives and angles, like on a hangout or an in-person conversation, and basically bounce ideas around and address a person's situation, problems, opportunities, possibilities, and then that gets into this whole thing of brainstorming options, but also maybe analyzing backstory and diagnosing a person in different ways, including in positive ways, like identifying who are they, what do they have, certain kind of characteristics in terms of how their minds work. You can use Myers-Briggs, for example, or psychiatry.
Won't it also bring out issues related to the people's approaches, to the various professionals' approaches that can be argued and debated?
Right, exactly. So even like within clinical psychology, like therapy, there are different therapists will have different sort of methodologies and backgrounds and perspectives or worldviews, and they may interpret the same person using completely different frames of reference and concepts and labels. And they may have a completely different vision for what does the world look like, and what are the possibilities, and what's like reasonable to do versus not reasonable. So just as an example, like using me as an example, a lot of people have criticized me for like having very vague ideas, maybe impractical ideas, not spending enough time doing traditional things like working in a specific profession and sticking with it and so on, because I'm trying to blend all these perspectives together, and it's kind of it's an ambiguous vision. But so somebody could look at what I have to say and listen to what I have to say and see something in it and be supportive, or they might say, look, you're out of your mind, you're talking about stuff that doesn't make any sense, and there's like a psychiatric problem here. Or someone else might say, I can see the business plan opportunity here, I can see how you could adapt this into like an actual process where you could earn a living, or other people could earn a living, or people could be connected with solutions to their problems. So that's the whole idea. And I think that's something that could be scaled, and it would be interesting to try out. And in fact, with this sort of charrette and almost Psych Tank thing, one of these events, workshops, Rose did a while back, kind of did this with me as the subject, and it was kind of a trial run, but basically the question was posed to people who were participating: how can Brendan get on track with what he's trying to do? And so that opened up this question of like, you know, who are you? What do you want? And I mean, really, to dive into that in more detail would have taken more time and a different mix of people probably. But it raises some of these questions, like, you know, what is a cognitive refugee? Just as an example, I mean, which is another term that's closely associated with screenstorming, which is a term basically I've been looking for a long time, like this thread I posted to School Survival in 2009, looking for a word to describe people who don't fit with traditional education paradigms or whatever.
But it's more than education paradigms, right? It's about, well, it's education paradigms around anything that you choose to learn, right? Like you're as a cognitive refugee, your mind doesn't work in the same way that a lot of people's does.
Right, exactly. So
you need these various alternative forms of connecting to information.
right, and figuring out life, I would argue, in general, since a lot of traditional paths through careers or jobs or whatever are, well, they don't fit for everyone. And even though there are, I mean, that's where it gets into this thing. There's sort of traditional paths of various kinds, but then there are other options. But very often when people think about other options, they think either about a rare set of people who, like superstars, like say Bill Gates or Michael Jordan, or musicians or something who happen to succeed, where not everyone is going to have that level of success or kind of success. And, you know, a person might figure out that they're that person, but for a lot of other people, there's the question of what are the paths outside of standardized paths. And then often the answer is, well, there's homelessness, destitution, like just undesirable outcomes, crashing with parents, not being able to support yourself, and I mean that circles background in into this whole thing of school and college, career, which gets into this thing like the situation that Mantha has, where her therapist is saying school, college, career, you got to do these things to get to your next level in school
so that you don't end up homeless and destitute.
Right, exactly. And then on the other side, I mean, you can almost look at it as a continuum. Like often parents want their kids to be above average successful, like more successful than them, or at least, you know, at least getting by. Probably a lot of parents push harder toward a higher point of success, but then they're all terrified of the low end of the spectrum of.
I think in all this, what you have to keep in mind is what an individual wants to do with their life, what they see themselves becoming? Do they want a family? You know, all these sorts of questions.
Right, that's a good point. Because that does lead to a very different life. There are life circumstances that are different if you're open to uncertainty and you don't necessarily want to have a family, or at least not immediately, or whatever. That leads to a different collection of possibilities and circumstances and obligations than if you want to go and start a relationship and a family and everything immediately or something, or earlier on in life. And then also, I mean, part of it too is some parents actually expect their kids to support them, or they want them to be available later on. I mean, this isn't always the case, but traditionally in some places and in cultures in particular, parents do expect their kids to be the provider for them when they're in old age. So that's part of what's on their mind as well. Although that's less common in the US, as many parents just want their kids to get out of the house and leave. So